Hey, Neurofeedback moms. I am Miriam Bellamy. I am the mom who started this group, and I am the director of Whole Family Neurofeedback. We have an just incredible guest with us today, going to talk to us a lot about sleep. This is Dr. Ed O'Malley. He has his PhD in neurobiology from Cornell. He's been practicing in sleep medicine for 25 years, clinically, in research settings, and in academic settings. He has published book chapters and peer-reviewed journal publications. He has been part of sleep medicine trials. He's been in the neurofeedback world for that long as well. So we're going to talk a lot about sleep today. As Ed and I have prepared for this, we talked about sleep is a family affair, and this group knows a lot about that. So if you're having difficulty with sleep, or you have a child who's having difficulty with sleep, Ed's going to talk to us about his 3 most important sleep tips. We're going to talk about how he thinks neurofeedback fits into that picture. And then we're going to talk about the safety of neurofeedback. So if you're with us, thank you very much. And let's get started with some questions. Thanks for being with us, Ed.
Okay. Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Miriam. I always love to talk about sleep. So you just tell me where to begin, and I'm happy to jump right in.
I can say first, too, the way I met Ed was that my daughter was struggling with sleep. And he really helped her. She didn't do all the things. She didn't need to do all the things that he was telling her to do. She does, and it made a difference. And actually now she is doing more of what he suggested, just because life sort of put her in that direction. And she's doing a lot better with sleep, which is a huge relief. So let's just start with
that
go ahead.
because that's such an important feature of working with kids and their sleep, particularly the older ones, because once they hit adolescence, and as moms of adolescents, you just know they are their own people. And so one of the ways in is to find out what's meaningful to them when they're not with all their friends. And then also point out what are the benefits that will support whatever is important to them. And that's what, she ended up doing, was following what she could do within her own world. And that's, that's half the battle right there, is getting them to do something that's really going to support their sleep within what they can do or what they perceive they can do. And that's a great way to get in.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. It's worked beautifully. And like I said, just even one of the things that you had recommended, she did it and it did help, but she had to make some of her own decisions. Yeah. My almost 20-year-old. No.
We've all been there, so we know about that, making our own decisions. Yes.
For sure. So let's talk about what are your top 3 tips for helping kids get to sleep, or for yourself.
Well, there is something about the commonality of what we do as physiological organisms in the world. And so the first one should be no surprise for biological organisms, and that is light exposure. Light is so critical to our bodies, to our minds, and it's what we evolved with in the natural world. It's only recently that we've come in, and even more recently that we actually have had the ability to have light at night. Okay, so the electric light and even lamps, began late 18th century or mid 19th century. And before that, we were just out in the light. And so we would arise with dawn and we'd go to bed right after sunset. And our internal rhythms still want to do that, but we're doing anything but that. So
my husband out here in Colorado, I have to say, my husband and I were like, is it 7 o'clock yet? Can we go to bed? Because we're like, it's dark at like 5 and we want to go to bed, but we're...
Yes. So you can imagine me talking to the adults in the wintertime and trying to get them to not have bright light exposure after sunset, because we all have things we need to do. Society demands we have a schedule that's more of a 16-hour day, no matter what season. But how can we then mitigate those effects? And this works across the board. And so that is, after sunset, we want to diminish the light exposure. We want to reduce it to some extent. And most importantly, we want to pull the blues out of the light exposure we're getting after sunset. And so all of our devices, of course, have really strong blue light components because that's what makes our screens look like daylight. That's what daylight is. It
Mm.
has a strong blue, and that's what dawn has. Once the sun comes up, there's really strong blue light, and that strong blue light is what tells our internal rhythms it's morning.
Oh my God.
And so to get back to the rhythm, so the sleep wake schedule is really important, but the most important part of the sleep wake schedule is the wake time. And that's because when we get exposed to light in the morning, it sets our internal melatonin rhythm to come on average, in a 16-hour a night, 16-hour a day person and an 8-hour a night sleeper, it comes on 16 hours later. So no matter what you're doing during your day, the time you got up this morning will tell your melatonin rhythm when to come back on. Now, there are a lot of things we could do to keep that melatonin rhythm from coming back on. We have our phones, we have our tablets, and back in the old days, we had TVs that we watched across the room, and light intensity drops by the fourth power of distance. And so I'm not going to, you
Oh,
physicists out there
interesting.
can figure that out. But yeah, when the TV's across the room, it's not nearly as impactful as having the laptop in bed with us looking at a movie. Okay, that light's coming in directly and really changing our rhythm. So if you're having trouble falling asleep at night, and you are looking or working late or doing emails late or working on your phone late, then you need to recognize that you got to pull the blue light out of that. And there are two ways of doing it. One is most of our devices now have this feature, bedtime feature, which you could set from sunset to sunrise, and it pulls the blues. It makes your screen look a little more orangey. Okay. And the oranges kind of don't have much blue in them. And so they allow your brain both to continue its internal rhythm and to begin recognizing it's sunset. It's time for the brain to
Mm.
wind down.
Mhm.
So that's one way, and the other way is to look really cool with these blue blocker sunglasses. Okay, I'm going to go get my headband and my beat. No, no, I'm not going to do that. But the orangey ones, you see the color here on these, okay? And
Mhm.
they have a side panel. They make them to go over your glasses, like I'm wearing, or just regular size to wear to block the blue light of what you're receiving. So if you can't pull it out of your devices and you have to do work at a certain hour, then go ahead and buy some of those $15 on Amazon, something like that, and get
Well,
your.
one thing I learned from you is that because I bought the clear colored ones for my daughters once, which they never wore, of course. But I learned from you that those don't work. That you actually have to have this dark
Yeah,
kind of one. Is there
yeah, the
anything
ones
somebody
that
can look for? How do they know they're getting the right ones?
they're blue blocker sunglasses, and they will look amber orangey like this.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
am I getting it up
Yep.
to the screen? There's the
Yep.
thing.
You
There it
got it.
is. Okay.
It looks a little
So
pinkish to me, but it's more of an amber. You're
yeah, it
saying.
depends on your
Okay.
screen, but yeah,
Yeah.
anything that's clear is not working. Okay, and a
Okay.
lot of those proliferated during the pandemic because people were spending so much time, like we are now, on our Zoom screens. But what was happening was they proliferated. They've done a couple of studies, and they don't seem to change any of the effect on
Okay.
tired eyes or any of that kind of thing,
Okay.
and they really don't have much effect on shifting your rhythm. Okay,
So
so.
computer settings, tablet settings, iPhone settings, whatever, phone settings, and then those
Right.
glasses are real helps to go with that first tip, which is modify light when the
Right.
sun sets. You
Right.
started to
Yeah.
allude to your second tip, which I was really surprised about, but it makes a lot of sense, which is wake up time is essential to going to be able to go to sleep. So, can you
Yeah.
go back to that?
Yeah. So, in the eye, actually in the eye, in the retina, we use it for vision, right? Color, shape, size, movement. But there are also a subset of cells in the retina that respond only to the presence or absence of light. And those
Hmm.
cells project directly to the master biological clock deeper in the brain, in the hypothalamus, and
Mm-hmm.
that little guy sends its signals back to the pineal gland deeper in the brain, which is the home of melatonin production. So when light is present, that signal is going back to the pineal gland saying, no melatonin, we're not ready for it. It's still daylight, it's still daytime.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the morning, of course, after melatonin's been on all night, it shuts down when light comes in, first thing in the morning. Okay, so if we get up and get ourselves out and get 5 minutes even of outdoor light exposure, way more intense than anything we can get indoors, that will set that strong signal that, hey, it's morning, shut down melatonin, and come back on 16 hours later, if
Mm-hmm.
you don't mind. And as long as you keep the blue lights out after sunset, 16 hours after you arose and got exposed to light, it will come
Mm-hmm.
back on and tell your brain it's time for bed. Let's get sleepy.
Okay.
Okay, so light's
Powerful.
really
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, the latest studies, really interesting, the latest studies are suggesting that sunset light exposure, so actually getting out
Hmm.
in the light during sunset, even on cloudy days, those diminished blues, they're kind of pulled out by sunset, uh, cue your brain enough that it actually reduces the impact to any blue light you have later in the evening. That's very new data. Very new
Wow.
data. So,
That I mean,
uh,
that's profound on so many levels. And it's talking about nature. We're
yeah,
so removed,
yeah,
myself included,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
just yeah, getting out
In
and
fact,
just taking a little
the
walk.
simple meta recommendation would be more in nature. Get that sense. Be more
Yeah.
natural in that respect. You know, morning
Mm-hmm.
light,
Mm-hmm.
afternoon, evening light, and then afternoon light. You know, doing some good relaxation during the day. I don't know if I mixed that in with my tips there somewhere, but
I don't. Not quite. Go
we
ahead. It's all
this is
right.
we're still working on the adults here and maybe the older adolescents, is to get out midday for that bright light, the brightest light we can get of the day, in order to
Oh,
get enough vitamin D, which also supports our sleep. Vitamin D, critically
okay.
important for good sleep, okay? And to
Hmm.
ward off seasonal affective disorder, which
Mm-hmm.
happens right about now in the northern hemisphere as we move into the shortest days of sunlight, right? The solstice
Mm.
is only a few days away. So you know, people's mood gets depressed in the wintertime. We don't have enough
Mm-hmm.
light. So getting out when you can get some would be great. And then finally, of course, bookending it at the end of the day. Always
Yeah.
helpful.
Nice. It sounds like a great day, actually. Go
Yeah,
outside for a few minutes in the morning, stop what
yeah,
you're doing, go back out there again, and then take a nice walk after dinner,
yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
It's, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. And then your third tip for moms and dads.
Moms and dads, you know, as you mentioned earlier, it's a family affair. There's no question that, you know, there are family systems at play, and when one part of the family system changes, the others too. It's really helpful for you guys to get your relaxation, to get your downtime, to reduce your stress, to do the best you can to get your sleep, because that will make you more able to deal with the vagaries of your children and all the screaming and shouting and fighting that goes on.
The
Okay.
vagaries. I love that. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, that's being very kind, right?
That's one word for it. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, it's important that we get our downtime. You know, I do these
Mm,
presentations and I have a slide that says that massage is not a luxury. It is a
mm,
necessity.
mm,
Okay. We need to do self-care. We need to take care of ourselves so that we can care for others. You know,
mm.
the thing on the airplanes when the oxygen mask comes down, you put it on yourself first before those who you need to help, because you need to be able to be strong enough and able to manage what's going on in the world. And look, I've been there. I've got 4 kids. I know about sleep deprivation when the kids are young. So I hear you. Well, I'm probably not speaking to you at the moment because you're just going to get sleep whenever the hell you can. Okay. It's hard for the
Yeah.
newborn parents. There's no question. But I would speak to that and I would say it's really important, if you have a partner, that the two of you share what you can share. Even if you're doing the breastfeeding at night, you're not the only one involved in the care of this baby. You need some downtime. You need to get some solid sleep. And
Mm-hmm.
so the partner needs to take over at times and give you those breaks whenever they can.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so,
And we need to let them. Is that part of that message?
yes, yes, you need to let them. Some people need to let them. Some people need to, goad them into helping. But whatever
Yes,
it
the whole
takes,
range. Sure.
you need to share the duties because you need your sleep. You
Mm-hmm.
just need
Mm-hmm.
your sleep. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I just think it's such an important point, and one that we talk about a lot. Here is taking care of self. It's not a luxury, right? It's
yeah,
part of the well functioning family system that you want is your own self care. So,
absolutely.
talk to us about neurofeedback. You've got quite a history and sleep. How did this start for you?
Oh,
Why did you
yes.
start adding neurofeedback? Yeah.
So, yeah, so early on, I found my niche in the sleep world. I mean, I've worked with all sleep disorders, off the bat. But I really noticed that there was a paucity of insomnia management. People who didn't have sleep apnea per se, didn't have restless legs per se, or any major shift work. They were just having trouble sleeping. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the first things I did after my training, I went to run a sleep disorder center at Newark Hospital in Connecticut, one of the teaching hospitals for Yale, and set up an insomnia center. And one of the first tools I wanted to look at was, what do we have technologically that can help support these folks who we had a lot of behavioral therapies, but they would only carry them so far. And while a lot of people did get better and they got better habits and they learned about their sleep and they stopped obsessing about it, there's some really good strategies for improving your sleep. But there were when we did do sleep studies on these folks, you can see their brain activity was just really a kind way of saying it would be all over the place.
Okay.
But it was very stressed brain activity, like really high activity. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't coming down by morning like most brains would do. And so I was looking for some kind of tools that might help us calm these brains. And so I heard of this. I'd heard about these technologies. I know a lot about biofeedback, and I started doing some biofeedback, helping people learn about their internal rhythms by connecting those internal rhythms to some external source. And that signal they're getting
Mm-hmm.
from outside themselves could help them know what was going on inside, and they can sort of indirectly learn how to do some relaxation. Um, but I needed more. So I went out to this meeting out in California, and it was a great meeting. It was a meeting of neurofeedback practitioners. There were biofeedback practitioners there too, but neurofeedback, I had heard some other stuff about this in the past, and I'd always wanted to just check into it. And I said, well, let me go see. This is a great meeting. And they had what's called this newbie day, right? Where the newbies to the field could spend a full day, and all of the providers who were out there to date had like a half an hour, 45 minutes to present their story, why their system works and what their system does. And I'm like, perfect. I don't know enough about this. Let them teach me. So I go to the meeting, and I'm one after the other, and it starts at 8 in the morning, you know. So by lunchtime, we're pretty worn out. And I'm seeing graphs and slides and like 57, like Heinz 57, the ketchup, 57 varieties of disorders that you would have different protocols for, different sensors in different locations, different frequencies you would raise up and down, all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So after lunch at about 1 o'clock, 1:30 or so, Val comes on. And Val Brown, who I understand most of you have seen a couple of interviews with him, he's the founder of Neuroptimal. He comes on, and most of the presenters prior to that were in like jackets and ties, and he comes on, he's got jeans on, he's got a t-shirt, he's got his hands in his pockets, and he just lazily walks to the front of the room, and he goes, you know they've been telling everything you've heard till now, they've been making it out to be so much harder than it really is. It's
Wow.
not that difficult. And I went, oh, okay. Besides the postprandial snooze time I was ready for, now I became alert. And I sat up and I'm like, okay, tell me how simple this is because my brain is swimming right now. And he presented the neuroptimal, the basis for neuroptimal, which is just really giving the brain information about the chaos it's in and saying, hey, do
Mhm.
you want to keep doing that or do you want to
Mhm.
find another way to go?
Mhm.
And uh, and so I brought that. I came back from that meeting. I was so stoked. I was psyched, and I said to my boss, and I work. I'm running a sleep center, but I'm in a hospital, a big hospital, and I said, look, I got to get one of these systems. This is incredible what it'll do for the insomnia patients. And he said, well, I don't know. How much does it cost? And I said, well, back then, I think it was like 3,500 or something. He goes, 3,500? Sure. I'm used to paying for MRIs, 75 grand, 35. Go ahead and get one. And I have not looked back since. In fact,
Mm.
my latest system, I just replaced another one. It's like E. O'Malley 27 because I have a lot of rental
Wow.
systems and I
Yeah.
have ones I've replaced over the years. But yeah, so brought it into the Insomnia Center and it was just remarkable. And I should say the reason I was looking for this is because insomnia, as we know, can have myriad underlying causes. So aside from
Mhm.
potential sleep disorders, there are, anyone with anxiety, depression, bipolar, PTSD, all of those mental or mood disorders almost all have a component of sleep issues. And we now know from the most recent research that you need to treat both of these almost independently. If you're not treating the
Mm.
insomnia at the same time you're treating the depression will take that much longer to heal and you may not get resolution. So,
Okay.
treating the insomnia is just as important in any other disorder, as well as those who just are stressed by the world, which is another,
Mhm.
it's a rough world out there these days, and I'm seeing a lot more people just with COVID issues, worrying about it and all of that. So
I heard a study on the radio, which I did. Okay, a study on the radio. Okay, they were reporting on I think a legitimate study. I haven't had a chance to look it up yet, but they said that people are more exhausted than they've ever been since the pandemic, and don't feel like they can get uh,
yeah,
rested, no matter right. And so at least some of that's going to
yeah,
have to do with sleep, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it
Oh,
was
sure. I tell
it's
people
huge.
just living in 21st century Western society, we need to take our breaks during the day. We need to interrupt the stress that's building, Miriam. We need to do this no matter what. I mean, we can find 5 or 10 minutes. It just has to happen. Otherwise, what's happening is we're building up this stress, right? It builds up during the
Yeah.
day. If we take even 5 or 10 minutes to just do some breathing, sitting in the chair, going nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
better if you
Mm-hmm.
can get outside, of course, but
Yeah.
you'll drop that level of acute arousals down somewhat. And then you're going to go back into that same crazy world. So the slope of that line is the same, but you're at
Mm-hmm.
a lower level than if you hadn't done anything at all.
Ah,
And so
nice.
if you can then do it a second time, I'm really pushing it now, I know. But if you could do it a second time, and I tell people, first time, do it during the circadian dip of the afternoon when you really are reaching for that cup of coffee, the chocolate, or whatever to
Mm.
back up. Take 5 minutes then,
Mm-hmm.
do some deep breathing. Just close your eyes wherever you're sitting, do some deep breathing, and then
Mm-hmm.
come back online. You'll feel refreshed. And again, your level of arousal is lower. And then at the end of the day, a great way to end the workday if it ever ends, is to then do it again before the evening starts, before the kids start kicking in, before dinner starts kicking in, and all that stuff happens. It's another great time to do it. And so that brings that level so much lower at bedtime, okay, than if you hadn't
Mm-hmm.
done anything at all, you'd be up here. And that is, some people say, oh, that doesn't bother me at all. I fall asleep without a problem. And then I wake up at 3 in the morning and I'm awake for the next hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
Or the sleep that used to be nice and deep is
Mm.
now not as deep because that arousal level that we carry to bed with us, that
Mm-hmm.
stress, it's going to keep our sleep lighter. We keep going deeper and lighter. It
Mm-hmm.
keeps it from being steady and restorative, refreshing. So we
Mm-hmm.
wake up even when we're getting what we think is the same amount of sleep, and we're more exhausted because it's not as refreshing, not as restoring.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'll tell you what. So I tell people my favorite time to do a neurofeedback session or a neurooptimal session is that midday, like around 2 o'clock.
yeah,
Um, it's sort of morphed these days for me into a long lunch, and at the end, I'll do a session, and then I'll come back to work.
nice.
Um, but even for me, I mean, I know not everybody's there, but starting to cook dinner is actually a relaxing time for me. It hasn't been that before, but of the last like 6 months or so, it's just become this
Yeah,
nice another way to relax.
right,
Could that count?
right.
Even though I'm doing something, it feels creative.
Absolutely.
I can't wait for my daughter to get home from work. We can hear all the crazy
I
stories.
when I sit with my patients, I say to them, when do you feel most relaxed during the day? What
Ah,
activities allow you to relax? And if
uh-huh.
it
Okay.
could be anything from riding a horse to cooking dinner
Okay.
to listening to heavy metal. If that's what you
Huh.
do to relax, that works for you. That's what I suggest you do
Okay.
because I can't predict what's going to work for you. I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on in
Yeah.
your head, and I don't
Yeah.
want to know half the time. So it's better that
Yeah.
you tell me what works for you,
Yeah.
and then we work with that. And like I even, you hear all over the recommendations, sleep hygiene and all that. Don't have a TV in the bedroom. I don't say that, especially if you already have one in the bedroom and that's what you use to help yourself relax before sleep. Well,
Mm.
keep the thing there. If that's what's working for you, if that's working for you, use it. The old advice columnist, Ann Landers, I don't know. She's getting to be really dated now, but she used to.
I'm older than I look. Yes, I know Ann Landers.
That's an underhand comment, but I'm glad I got it. Okay. I'm as old as I look, so there's no question I know Ann Landers. But her favorite mantra was, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." Okay.
Mm,
So like I
I
give
hear
these
you.
webinars
Yeah.
and presentations all the time, and I have all these different things to do about getting good sleep. And I say, well, wait a minute. If your sleep is already working and you're fully restored by it, and you know that by
Mm.
being alert and aware all day, reasonably engaged, not irritable and cranky, and you get done what you need to get done, and put off till tomorrow what you can't get done instead of trying to do your emails up until 11:30. Uh, all of those are signs that you're getting enough sleep.
So the
Or
takeaway
you're,
here is put off until tomorrow what you can. Yes.
but there's a good reason. There's a good reason too,
Yes.
because you will more efficiently do it in like half the time the next day than if you try to stay up late and do it when your brain's
Yeah.
starting to close down and like, what are you doing to me up here? I'm
You're
trying to.
exhausted. Yeah. You're fighting
Yeah,
motivation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a big
yeah.
one. All right. So tell us quickly about is neurofeedback safe? The context of this question is people will post, they're doing neurofeedback, either neurooptimal or they're doing linear in a clinic with a practitioner, and their child, becomes anxious or starts being hyperactive and things like that. And people get, that anxiety spreads in this
Yeah,
group.
yeah,
So can you speak
yeah.
to that? I mean, you've been at this for a very long
Sure.
time. Is neurofeedback safe?
Neurofeedback is absolutely safe. When we talk about side effects, and I put quotes around them because they're really more like unwanted effects of
Hmm.
neurofeedback, they're way less than anything you can get from something as simple as aspirin. So drugs will always give you more potential harm than neurofeedback. What's happening in neurofeedback, whatever type you're
Hmm.
doing, um, is that when a kid has what looks like a side effect or an unwanted effect, it usually means they're bumping up against whatever it is that's creating the issue for that brain, for that person, for that child. And in order for them to get through it, they may need to face a fear. They may need to express something that they weren't able to express, and that's why
Hmm.
they're having these issues. They're,
Hmm.
these symptoms are coming out because something they couldn't get through, or something they bumped into, or they have some PTSD from something and need to, in a sense, at the brain level, sort of face it and move through it. The parents, when that's happening, the best thing they can do is either get a session themselves so
Mm-hmm.
that they're not feeding back that anxiety to the child and making it even worse, because
Yeah.
that will make it worse. And
Mm-hmm.
it will both help them and keep them from feeding it back.
Mm-hmm.
And even just that awareness that what's happening is kind of what needs to happen. Now, if it continues, then maybe you need to go back and you need to work on something. Something may not be right, but that's generally the exception and not the rule.
Mm-hmm.
And I've run into it too. And so I usually educate parents up front, and I say, look, there may be, and I want to have that time each time with the child and with the parent to hear what's
Mm-hmm.
happened between sessions. What are the
Mm-hmm.
teachers saying? What's the parent saying? What are
Mm-hmm.
the neighbors saying? If you and what's the child feel like is happening? The
Yeah.
child is so informative. Again,
It's
I
huge.
go, what do they need? What do they feel like they need? And how can I address that? And when I
Mm-hmm.
give them that, they feel safe because they've been seen, they've been heard, and they're
Mm-hmm.
able to then work with me. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't had a child not able to do it in the office
Mm-hmm.
here with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's just because I listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just little adults, right? They are
Mm-hmm.
children. That adolescent age, they're halfway in between.
Yeah.
And so it takes a little more work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's doable. So start with that. Have the parents start with, look, this can work. There's some issue that's creating these symptoms that my child may bump up against and have
Mm-hmm.
some more symptoms first before crossing that threshold and getting to the other
Mm-hmm.
side, or
Mm-hmm.
crossing the mountain to the other side.
Yeah.
So,
That's my most important work is in many different ways, but I'll I'll be even when somebody wants to rent and do the neurofeedback at home. I want to know. I'll educate the parents and say this, that, or the other could come up. These are the kinds of things we see. The most important thing is that you don't freak out.
right.
That is the most important thing. And sometimes I will discourage parents from renting because I can tell they're going to freak out and it's not going to
Yeah.
help their child, and it's an investment, and
Yeah.
how we respond is just a huge part of it.
Yeah. And if you're going to rent the system, then you do a few sessions first. Then we'll talk, and then we'll talk about how to do your child. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they really need to do a couple to know what's going on. Because as soon as they
Yeah.
have any kind of negative response or reaction to the neurofeedback, the child's going to pick that up and go, "Okay, I'm not doing this. It's either not safe, or it's dangerous, or they
Mm.
don't think it's going to work anyway. So why am I bothering?"
I have to say one other thing because I've had a couple of times where they get the neurofeedback unit, they want it for the child, but the child won't do it. They'll refuse to do it. So the parents do it and the child gets better. I've
Yeah.
seen this happen a couple of
That's
times.
beautiful.
It's so
Yeah.
powerful, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that is a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily, I mean, well, not luckily, but I haven't seen it that often. I have seen that too, though. I
Yeah.
have seen that too.
Yeah.
Or the child begins to do it because they're like, hey, they're having all the fun. Let me try it. Let me try
Yes.
it out.
I
Oh,
love
look,
it.
they hooked it up to the big screen TV. I could do that. I could watch something on that big screen TV, whatever.
Yeah.
So we have to be flexible, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's whole family. It's whole family. Yeah.
Yes, it is. So, Dr. O'Malley has, well, if you're interested in a consult with Dr. O'Malley, he will make himself available to any of our moms for a free phone consult. If you're struggling with sleep, or you have a child who's struggling with sleep, he'll spend some time with you on the phone and make recommendations for the best course, whether that's working with him or if that's him referring out. So you can reach him at ed@youroptimalnature.com. You can also check out his website there. Any final words, Dr. O'Malley?
Well, if any dads slipped in, I'd be happy to listen to them too. If they snuck on here, or if they hear this, from the other
They're
room, they're
here.
not really listening. Um,
They're
but no,
here.
like Val would say, it's all a lot simpler than they make it out to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say, that's a good mantra for life. Go at it more
Mm.
simply. Okay, let
Yeah.
go of what you can let go of. Deal with what is right here in front of us. Stay out of fear as much as possible. All we can do is what's in front of us, right? We can plan for the future, but we're doing it from here. We can look at the past and have
Hmm.
it hamstring us, but
You
that's
bet.
us from here in this moment. So what can we work with here? Let's stick
Hmm.
with the present.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think Neuroptimal, I think, can help a lot. It has helped me a lot with that, is
yeah,
moving towards not overthinking. It's
yeah,
simpler than you think it is. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
thanks for being
Perfect.
with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Miriam. It was great talking to your audience, and I hope some people got some great something they can do
Me
that'll
too.
help their sleep or their
Yeah.
lives. Yeah.
Me too.
Okay.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Sure. Bye bye.